The Denison Forum podcast exists to discuss timely news with biblical insight and practical applications. And right now, there is nothing more timely than the upcoming election. That's why on August 1st, we're launching our new series called Politics Discerned Differently. Join us in our 8-week series as we discuss all things election 2024. We'll discuss topics like separation of church and state, how to be civil with uncivil people, election fairness, and even answering the questions like, is America a Christian nation? If you're not already following the Denison Forum podcast, do that now so you don't miss this upcoming series starting August 1st. Thank you for joining us.
It's Tuesday, July the 30th, 2024. Welcome to the Daily Article Podcast. Today's article is written by Dr. Jim Denison and narrated by Chris Elkins of the Denison Forum. We are nearing the moment in which we face an all-out war. This is how Israeli Foreign Minister Israel Katz responded to a missile attack last Saturday in the Golan Heights town of Majdal Shams that killed at least 12 boys and girls ranging in age from 10 to 16. Dozens more were injured and taken to hospitals. The massacre was the deadliest attack on Israeli civilians since Hamas's invasion last October the 7th. If it does, in fact, lead to an all-out war, it will be a conflict no one wants. It will devastate two nations and could spark a global conflict. And all over what might be a mistake. Hezbollah, the Iranian terrorist proxy in Lebanon, denied responsibility for the strike, claiming that the tragedy was the result of an Israeli anti-rocket interceptor hitting the soccer field. However, the Israel Defense Forces denied this charge, and a U.S. official said, "There's no real doubt this was Hezbollah." Israel's military chief spokesman added that the rocket used in the attack is owned exclusively by Hezbollah. The Majdal Shams attack came hours after an Israeli airstrike on southern Lebanon killed 3 Hezbollah members. The militants then targeted an Israeli base on the slopes of Mount Hermon, about 2 miles from where the explosion happened, raising the possibility that the missile missed its target. Israeli analysts said Hezbollah most likely did not target the village. U.S. officials are likewise working on the assumption that the strike was an accident. It is also noteworthy that Majdal Shams' victims were Druze Arabs, not Jews. If this was a tragic accident, why would it lead to an all-out war? Hezbollah does not want a wider war with Israel because such a conflict would devastate Lebanon. The country's economy collapsed in recent years, with 80% of the population now estimated to be in poverty. As the geopolitical expert Mohanad Hajali reports in Foreign Affairs, the country could be hard-pressed to rebuild after a ground war. Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and other regional actors aided the reconstruction efforts after the 2006 war, but Saudi Arabia downgraded its diplomatic ties in 2021 in response to Hezbollah's support for the Houthi rebels in Yemen. But here's the other side of the issue. Hezbollah is unlikely to sign a ceasefire with Israel before Hamas does. Hezbollah began launching rockets at Israel the day after the October 7th invasion, both in solidarity with their fellow militants and also to exercise their leading role in Iran's axis of resistance in the region. A cessation of conflict with Israel now would cost them credibility with their Palestinian and other Middle Eastern allies. If Israel escalates the conflict, it's hard to see how Hezbollah could not respond in the same way. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu visited the site of the attack yesterday and said, "Our response is coming, and it will be severe." Israel struck Hezbollah targets deep inside Lebanon the day before, targeting weapons caches and infrastructure. However, the Washington Post reports that this attack fell short of the furious response Israeli officials threatened after Saturday's Majdal Shams massacre. And 2 Israeli officials said yesterday that Israel was preparing for the possibility of a few days of fighting. Unidentified officials said the response would be limited but significant. Here's their dilemma. Hezbollah is the most heavily armed group in the Middle East. They are estimated to have about 150,000 rockets and missiles, which could overwhelm Israel's sophisticated air defense system. Their arsenal also includes precision-guided missiles that could strike deep into Israeli territory. As an Israeli friend told me recently, many of these missiles fly below Israel's detection capacities and thus would not be stopped by the Iron Dome and other defense systems. In an all-out war, virtually every person and place in Israel could come under attack. A major operation against Hezbollah could also bring other Iranian-backed proxies in the region into a multi-front conflict. But here's the other side of the issue. When Hamas invaded on October the 7th, Israeli officials were alarmed that Hezbollah's terrorists could do the same in its northern villages. They immediately evacuated 60,000 of these residents, placing most of them in hotels around the country. Hezbollah then bombed many of these evacuated towns, rendering them uninhabitable. 9 months later, these refugees, along with many of Israel's military leaders, are pressing for the IDF to force Hezbollah back from the border to create a buffer zone in northern Israel so they can return to their communities. Saturday's tragedy could instigate such an offensive and a larger war could result. Iran's president, Masoud Pezeshkian, warned that any Israeli attack on Lebanon could have serious consequences for Israel. If the conflict brought Iran into the war, its alliance with Russia and China could make this a world war. If that were to happen, the U.S. and Israel's other allies in the West could be forced to join the war in defense of the Jewish state. However, my point is not to predict that such a global war is imminent. Rather, it is to illustrate how the Majdal Shams massacre could be the spark that ignites one, and to remind us that the only source of true peace in the world cannot be produced by the world. So long as Jews and Muslims both claim the same land, the regional conflict will continue. So long as Iran, Russia, and China aspire to regional and even global dominance, geopolitical conflict will continue. Only when people everywhere make Jesus their Lord will they be empowered to forgive and love their enemies, from Luke 6:27, treat all people as sacred bearers of the divine image as taught in Genesis 1:27, and trade the will to power for hearts of humility and service, referencing John 13, verse 35. This is why God's word links peace with godliness in Hebrews 12, verse 14. Strive for peace with everyone and for the holiness without which no one will see the Lord. Will you pray for such peace through holiness right now? Will you work to answer your prayer today? Listeners like you support Denison Forum's mission to deliver news discerned differently. As a ministry nonprofit, we are fully donor supported. To partner with us, please donate today using the donate link in our show notes.